Bismillah, alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalam ala sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala. So, we said we're going to be looking at 10 days in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There will be somehow turning points in his life, and we try and deduce ideas and principles from those days. We looked our first day was the day of, what was it? Arbitration, exactly. Yawm al-Tahkim. And then we had the second day, the day of revelation. And the third is the day of the one we had last week. Persecution. Today, last week we looked at persecution embodied in the Prophet's day in Al-Akabah, and how that event or incident in the Prophet's life was a really, literally the peak of the persecution that he had received. The day we're looking at today is often known in Sirah as Yawm Al-Akabah. Yawm Al-Akabah. Al-Akabah literally means like a mountain pass, an area between a couple of mountains. And it's named after a couple of meetings that the Prophet ﷺ had with some groups. I'll come to this in a minute. So when the Prophet ﷺ came back to Mecca after his day in Al-Ta'if, he did not lose hope. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had supported him through the journey of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. But he himself did not stop. In addition to the work that he used to do with his companions, he started to target the pilgrims, al-Hujjaj, the pilgrims who would come to Mecca to do Hajj. The Prophet ﷺ would approach them secretly, and yet we know that the Prophet and his family were boycotted for 3 years prior to that. But even in the midst of this, what I have today is I have an example of how difficult it was to even meet with those people and engage with individuals that the Prophet ﷺ wanted to talk with. I just shared just one example, which is known it's a companion named Al-Tufayl ibn Amr al-Dawsi. Al-Tufayl ibn Amr al-Dawsi was one of the respected poets of the Arabs back then. To show you how difficult it was for the Prophet ﷺ to engage with people in that period. Now we're looking at, Al-Ta'if was when the Prophet ﷺ was 50 years of age. He's now back into Makkah. This is his 10th year after becoming a Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this man came from Al-Yaman. قدم الطفيل بن عمرو الدوسي مكة. Ibn Ishaq, one of the key historians of the Seerah, if not the key historian, he tells us this. He says قدم الطفيل بن عمرو الدوسي مكة. Tufayl, his name, Tufayl, came to Mecca. He says, وَكَانَ رَجُلًا شَرِيفًا. He was a noble man, comes from a noble family. He was actually the chief of his tribe. شَاعِرًا لَبِيبًا. He was a respected poet and a very wise man. فَحَالَتْ قُرَيْشٌ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. But the people of Quraysh, they know that this man is a respected man. They approached him and they said to him, you shouldn't talk to Muhammad. وخوفوه من الدنو إليه, and they started to really scare him of getting in contact with him. وسماع كلامه, and they tried to really keep him away from even listening to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. وقالوا إنا نخشى عليك وعلى قومك ما قد دخل علينا. So they said, we were really afraid that the problem we're dealing with, if you listen to Muhammad, this problem will move to your own tribe as well. So we're trying to keep you away from this. فلا تكلمنه ولا تسمعن منه شيئا. So don't talk to him, don't listen to what he has to say. That's the level of it. Not even talking to the people. يقول طفيل says, والله ما زالوا بي حتى أجمعت أن لا أسمع منه شيئا. So they kept really insisting on this until I made up my mind that I'm not listening to this man. ولا أكلمه حتى حشرت في أذني قطنا. Said, and I'm not going to talk to him, and that I've actually stuffed my ears with cotton, so that I don't get even to listen to him, not even by chance. Can you imagine? وقدرت إلى المسجد, but then I went to المسجد الحرام. فإذا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قائم يصلي عند الكعبة. And I happened to have seen the Prophet praying at the Kaaba. فقمت منه قريبا, and I came close. فأبى الله إلا أن يسمعني بعض قوله. But Allah had decreed that I would get to listen some of what he had to say. قال فسمعت كلاما حسنا. But he said I heard something that was beautiful. فقلت في نفسي, and I thought to myself, وثقل أمي, shame on me. والله إني لرجل لبيب شاعر. By Allah, I am a wise, a poet, and I know, I have a good mind. ما يخفى علي الحسن من القبيح. I have the capacity to really distinguish what is good from what is bad. فما يمنعني أن أسمع من هذا الرجل ما يقول. What is really stopping me from listening to this man? فإن كان الذي يأتي به حسنا قبلته. If it's a good thing, I would just take it up. وإن كان قبيحا تركته. If it's a bad thing, I would just keep away from it. ودخل الطفيل على رسول الله في بيته. الطفيل came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم and started to, and حكى له القصة. And he actually told him his own story, how the people of Mecca asked him not to listen to the Prophet, and he stuffed his ears with cotton. But he got to listen just. That's the impact of the Quran. When someone who appreciates the beauty of the Arabic language. So he accepted Islam immediately. وحكى له القصة فعرض عليه رسول الله الإسلام. And the Prophet presented or introduced Islam to him and recited some Quran to him, and he accepted Islam. Again, that's just an indication of how difficult the circumstances were. A man who is a wise, a young man, who started not even to listen to what the Prophet ﷺ would have to say. And that takes us into the essence of what we mentioned today, Yawm Al-Akabah. As I said, Al-Akabah is the name of a place. Al-Akabah literally means like some sort of a valley, like a mountain pass between two mountains. And this Aqabah, that is known in Seerah as Yawm Al-Akabah, is literally, Al-Akabah as a place is literally 5 kilometers from Mecca. So it's literally on the outskirts of Mecca. The Prophet ﷺ started to meet secretly with those, the Arab Peninsula. They had much respect for the Kaaba. They would come every year for Hajj. The Prophet ﷺ started to talk to them privately. Then as he was around Al-Kaaba, he came across 6 people. When we say Yawm Al-Aqabah, we are actually referring to 3 days. 3 days that had happened in 3 years. Yawm Al-Aqabah is the first day in which he met 6 people, 6 of those people. from Medina. Then the next year they came and they were 12. And then in the third year they came and they were 75. So it's the first time they meet the Prophet ﷺ, 6 people. The Prophet ﷺ says to them, أَلَا تَجْلِسُونَ أُكَلِّمُكُمْ? Won't you sit there? I want to talk to you. فَاسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. So they listened and they sat down. All this has happened in secrecy. And these people, they are coming from Medina. Medina had a really difficult history. Medina was a very diverse community. It had 2 major tribes were known as Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, plus the Jewish community. So they always had troubles, like fights, and there is a day that is known in history as the Yawm Bu'ath, a day in which they really had a massive and a major fight, a major battle. So the Prophet ﷺ is talking to them, and they are in the midst of this mentality. What all it takes is just someone says, this man from this tribe has insulted me or something, and then the battle strikes. So in the midst of the fights, we mentioned 2 primary tribes, Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, plus the Jewish community. So the Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj would fight together, and they would have the fights with the Jews of Medina. When the Jews of Medina would fight with them, they would say, wait for the day. So the Jewish community was expecting a prophet to come. So they would be telling the Aws and the Khazraj that when this prophet comes by, we will be with him and he will support us to really defeat you. Right? So these 6 people that came to Mecca this particular time, they were not Jews. They were from the Aws and the Khazraj. The Prophet ﷺ asks them, مِمَّ وَالِي يَهُودَ أَنْتُمْ, are you from the Jewish community? They said, no, we're not from the Jewish community. The Prophet ﷺ started to talk to them. And they said, وَاللَّهِ إِنَّهُ لَلنَّبِيُّ الَّذِي تَوَعَّدَتْنَا بِهِ يَهُودُ. This is actually the prophet that the Jews has been talking to us about. فَلَا يَسْبِقُنَّكُمْ إِلَيْهِ. Don't let them, get them, or be with them. So now, the first motive, the context, now we have to understand the context in which the Prophet ﷺ started this conversation. It's a context, so for them, it wasn't just a question of faith, but also a question of, we need someone who would support us to introduce some stability to Medina. And if there is a prophet who is, divinely supported, that would mean some good peace for Medina. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, his first ever speech in Medina when he arrived, addressing all those communities, he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أَفْشُوا السَّلَامِ, spread peace, وَأَطْعِمُوا الطَّعَامِ, and feed the poor and the needy. And the idea of peace was a very important one here. And we as modern people, we underestimate the value of peace. We only think of peace at times of war. So peace, here is the point, that's a context of struggle that the people of Medina are struggling with, and they have seen in the Prophet ﷺ not only a salvation for the hereafter, but also a salvation for the here. So as we said, these were 6 people. Next year, they went back to Medina, and they came back next year. This time, those 6 people, they have talked to 6 others. So now we have 12 people who accepted Islam. So they put the new 6 people to the Prophet ﷺ next year. And here, the Prophet ﷺ gets to meet them in the very same place, Yawm Al-Akabah, in that place that's called Al-Akabah. Ubadah ibn Samit, one of the key companions of the Prophet ﷺ, says, كنت في من حضر العقبة الأولى. I was with those who attended the first Aqabah, the first meeting that the Prophet ﷺ had with them. He says, وكنا 12 رجلا. We were 12 men. فبايعنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Now we get to see how the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم would really have this pledge with them. فبايعنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على أن this hadith or this narration actually to me it's when we think of when you come to introduce someone to Islam, we often begin with the 5 pillars of Islam and this and that. To me, this hadith reveals more about how the Prophet what would be the content of his first conversation with someone who's a newcomer to Islam. What is it? He says, فَبَايَعْنَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم عَلَىٰ أَنْ لَا نُشْرِكَ بِاللَّهِ شَيْئًا. So we've given a pledge to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We agreed to the Prophet that we're not going to associate partners with Allah. That's the first one. على أن لا نشرك بالله شيئا ولا نسرق, and that we won't steal. ولا نزني, and we won't commit adultery. ولا نقتل أولادنا, and that we don't kill our kids. ولا نأتي ببهتان نفتريه بين أيدينا وأرجلنا, and that we won't falsely accuse each other. ولا نعصيه في معروف, and that we won't disobey the Prophet ﷺ in what is right. That's the content of the first. You see, the essence of the message of Islam is primarily ethical. The Prophet ﷺ is focusing on one primary thing: don't associate partners with Allah, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't kill your kids, don't lie. All ethical things. So ethics is a very primary thing in Islam. It's almost the first thing the Prophet ﷺ introduces to them. قال لنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن وفيتم فلكم الجنة, and if you fulfilled this, heaven or paradise is your reward. وإن غشيتم من ذلك شيئا, but if you fail to really commit to this, فأمركم إلى الله عز وجل إن شاء عذب وإن شاء غفر. It's up to Allah whether to forgive you or to punish you if you fail to fulfill. The Prophet ﷺ had sinned, so now they have had this meeting, they have given the Prophet ﷺ this pledge. But the Prophet ﷺ, up to this very moment, knows we don't have enough people to really work to move to Medina yet. We don't have enough people in Medina that would really host us. Right? What he did is that he sent with them اختار من بين أصحابه مصعب بن عمير. He sent with them one companion to teach them. Mus'ab ibn Umayr, to teach them Quran. So he went with them, and Mus'ab had a massive impact on them. Next year they come, as we said, 75 people who accepted Islam. 73 men and 2 women. So they finished Al-Hajj. Next year, we are now in the 3rd year. They had to meet the Prophet ﷺ literally after the first third of the night. So it was very secretive. And you were literally sneaking in. Until they met in this very place, Al-Akabah again. He says, فَاجْتَمَعْنَا فِي الشِّعْبِ نَنْتَظِرُ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said, we went to this place, Al-Akabah, waiting for the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. حتى جاءنا معه عمه العباس بن عبد المطلب. But this time the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم brought with him his uncle. Even though هو يومئذ على دين قومه, even though Al-Abbas was not a Muslim yet, but it's his uncle. إلا أنه أحب أن يحضر أمر ابن أخيه ويتوثق له, but he wanted to make sure that his nephew is in safe hands. فلما جلس كان أول متكلم العباس بن عبد المطلب. When the Prophet when they all sat down, The first one to speak was his uncle, Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib. And Abbas said, Ya Mashar al-Khazraj, he said, oh Khazraj, the people of Khazraj, Inna Muhammadan minna haythu qad alimtu. That Muhammad is very dear to us. وَقَدْ مَنَعْنَاهُ مِنْ قَوْمِنَا. And we've managed to protect him for over a decade now. So for us, we can continue to protect him. وَقَدْ مَنَعْنَاهُ مِنْ قَوْمِنَا فَهُوَ فِي عِزٍّ وَمَنْعَةٍ. So let's assure that he's already safe with us. وَإِنَّهُ قَدْ أَبَى إِلَّا الْإِنْحِيَازَ إِلَيْكُمْ وَالْلُحُوقَ بِكُمْ. But he insists on joining you and being in Medina. فَإِن كُنْتُمْ تَرَوْنَ أَنَّكُمْ وَافُونَ لَهُ بِمَا دَعَوْتُمُوهُ إِلَيْهِ. If you think you can really fulfill the promises you're giving us, وَمَانِعُوا مِمَّنْ خَالَفَهُ, and that you can protect him against his enemies, فَأَنْتُمْ وَمَا تَحَمَّلْتُمْ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. Then that is your promise, you need to keep your promise. وَإِن كُنْتُمْ تَرَوْنَ أَنَّكُمْ مُسْلِمُوهُ وَخَاذِلُوهُ. But if you think you're not very sure whether you can support him, and if you're not really up to it, بعد خروجه إليكم فمن الآن فدعوه. If you don't think you can really fully support him, then say it now. Right? ولم يكد يتلقى منهم إجابة مطمئنة حتى شفعها بهذا السؤال الذكي الحصيف. But even before the answer, he asked another very important question. He said, but before you answer, صفوا لي الحرب. He said, tell me about battles and wars. He wants to see how experienced they are. If things get tough, would they be to support the Prophet ﷺ? صفوا لي الحرب كيف تقاتلون عدوكم? How do you guys fight? To see how strong they are when things get tough. فقالوا, one of them said, نحن والله أهل الحرب. He says, this is our business. غُذِينَا بها ومرنا عليها. We literally, we were raised on it. And we were trained in it. Really good accustomed to it. وَرِثْنَاهَا عَنْ آبَائِنَا كَابِرًا عَنْ كَابِرٍ. We've inherited this from our ancestors. That tells you that idea. I was just talking about how difficult the context in Medina was. Aus and Khazraj, and they would fight literally for the simplest reasons. And then he actually kept asking, okay, كيف تحاربون? What tools do you guys use when you get to fight? They mentioned the arrows, they mentioned the shields and this and that. And the conversation went on. He really wants again to understand how skilled they are. Then Al-Abbas said, Ya Rasulullah, now my turn is done. تكلم, it's your time to talk. فخذ لربك ولنفسك ما أحببت. Just mention whatever you want to mention in terms of the agreement, what am I expecting from you. ثم قال صلى الله عليه وسلم أبايعكم على أن تمنعوني مما تمنعون منه أهليكم وأبنائكم. I have one primary request, that you protect me from whatever you protect your families and kids from. Then Aman with the name of Al-Bara ibn Ma'ruf, he held the Prophet's hand and he said, نعم والذي بعثك بالحق لنمنعنك مما نمنع منه أنفسنا. By Allah, we will really protect you with whatever we protect ourselves with. You're going to be one of us. فنحن والله أبناء الحروب وأهل الحلقة ورثناها كابرا عن كابر. As we just said, that's don't worry about it. We're up to it. Then one of them, a man with the name of Abu Haytham ibn Tayyihan, said, Ya Rasulullah, inna baynana wa bayna al-Yahudi hibalan, and we have some ties with the Jewish community in Medina. وَإِنَّا قَاطِعُونَ, but we're willing to cut our relations off with them. فهل عسيت إن نحن فعلنا ذلك ثم أظهرك الله أن ترجع إلى قومك وتدعنا. Basically saying, at the moment we'll have some, agreements with the Jewish community, but we're willing to cut it off because we don't feel happy with it. Now that we have you, and we will be two teams at Awsam and Khazraj, but if we do this, and you become so powerful, would you come back to Mecca and just leave us? فتهلأ وجه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم responded with a bright smile. He said, بل الدم الدم والهدم الهدم. He said, no, I will be with you, and I will live with you, and I will die with you. أنا منكم وأنتم مني. I am with you and you are from, I am from you and you are from me. أحارب من حاربتم وأسالم من سلم. I will fight whoever you fight, and I will have peace with whoever you have peace with. Then again, as the same sentence gets repeated, قالوا يا رسول الله ما لنا يا رسول الله إن نحن وفينا بذلك. What is for us if we really fulfill this? The Prophet says in one word, Al-Jannah. This is the reward of this is heaven, being with Allah. And then they all started to say, "Uqsut yadaka ya Rasulullah yubayyi'uk." Stretch out your hand. Well, willing to give that pledge of allegiance to you. Then the Prophet ﷺ asked them, and we're talking about 75 people, he asked them to really pick and choose 12 leaders out of those 75. So that when they go back to the people, the Prophet is somehow dividing the tasks amongst them. He said, أخرجوا إلي منكم 12 نقيبا. Pick 12 leaders ليكونوا على قومهم بما فيهم, and they will divide you into 12 tribes, educating the people, and to build up this sort of network in Medina, so to speak. They were so excited that they said, وَالَّذِي بَعَثَكَ بِالْحَقِّ إِنْ شِئْتَ لَنَمِيلَنَّ عَلَى أَهْلِ مِنَا غَدًا أَسْيَافِنَا. They got so excited that they said, if you want us to go and fight the people at Mina in Mecca, right now we're happy to come with you. Right? People said, no, لم نؤمر بذلك. We haven't been asked to do this. ولكن ارجعوا إلى رحالكم. But go back to tents. They were basically in tents. Now they all went to Medina. The Prophet ﷺ, after he sent, now they have Mus'ab ibn Umayr, other companions started to, travel from Mecca to Medina. Many of them, like we have Umar, we have, and many others, they started to really travel and move to Medina. But the Prophet ﷺ was not asked to leave Mecca yet. That's another day, inshallah. But that's the day of Al-Akabah, basically. The Prophet ﷺ was forming networks before he moved to Medina. That was when we try to really deduce principles from those days. As we said, it's always wise when you come to study the Seerah, what happens, our minds get so much attached to, too much attached to either individuals or places or times, when the whole point, when you come to study the Seerah, is getting the ideas and the principles behind it. But it's good also to really, as we said, as we always do, to identify the places, identify the things, so we divide it into 3: ideas, people, and things. If we begin with things can be places, can be objects, it can be whatever. What things do, and when we talk about why it's important to talk about things, because things or objects can be very symbolic. We've seen this in the past episodes. How things and objects were actually symbolic. in what they mean. When we think of things out of those, so today we've looked at the Tufayl ibn Amr al-Dawsi coming to Mecca, stuffing his ears with cotton so that he doesn't get to listen to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sitting, trying to talk to people secretly, and the days of Al-Akabah. That's I'm trying to summarize for you what we've covered today. So when you think of things, what things come to your mind? Things that are symbolic. What could you think? Anything of?
Everything you just said right now. So Mecca, Medina,
why not?
Cities.
Yes.
Even the cotton bud.
Yeah.
What else?
Cotton,
The
like
cotton.
representing not listening.
Yeah, that's so interesting, really. A man who's a poet, a respected, noble man, not even giving himself a chance to listen to the Prophet ﷺ, and he stuffs his ears with cotton so he doesn't get to listen to the Prophet ﷺ. That's again very symbolic of the context. That's how difficult it was for the Prophet ﷺ to really just talk. We have this after 10 years when the Prophet ﷺ moved to Medina and he came back to Mecca in year 8, if I'm not mistaken. And the people of Mecca were still willing to fight the Prophet ﷺ, even though he came and he was so powerful. And he felt for them. And he said something that is deeply moving. He said, وَيْحَ قُرَيْشٍ لَقَدْ أَكَلَتْهُمُ الْحَرْبُ. What's wrong with the people of Quraysh? That fighting against me has eaten them up. Right? لَقَدْ أَكَلَتْهُمُ الْحَرْبُ. That those years of battles have really eaten them up, have destroyed them. He's looking at the place where he was born and raised. These are not the people that I really grew up with. They were much more powerful. So he feels for them. And they are still willing to fight him. They are getting prepared, even though he's coming with a large army. They are saying he's not happy with that situation. Then he says, وَمَاذَا عَلَيْهِمْ لَوْ خَلَّوْا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ النَّاسِ. What would they have? What would they have lost if they have just let me talk to people? So they were able to stop him from talking to people. فإن أظهر عليهم فعزي عزهم. If I, become victorious, then we will just share this victory. وإن يأخذوني فقد عصموا منها. And if they really take me, if I get defeated, then it's nothing to do with them. They have been saved from this. Right? So that's again the context. People of rebellion, people of stubbornness. So cotton is a symbol here. Yes, absolutely. I think any other things I will mention today. Al-Akabah, the mountain pass. Al-Akabah. That's a symbol, and you can read it as a symbol of how things become so small and then they grow to become a mountain. You begin underneath the mountain, and the Prophet ﷺ becomes more phenomenal. So Al-Akabah is literally symbolic. Any other things?
The weapons.
The weapons. It's actually a long passage where Al-Abbas asks them, tell me about how you use the shields, tell me how you use the arrows, tell me how you use the swords. And now he's asking very practical questions. And that again speaks, even though he was not a Muslim, that shows you how that sense of tribalism was still a big thing. That's his nephew. He's supporting his nephew no matter what. and he wants to make sure it's safe for him. And he inherited this from his father Abu Talib, that sense of support. Abu Talib, according to the vast majority of historians, did not accept Islam, but he said he was a massive supporter of the Prophet ﷺ in the name of trying. I believe he accepted Islam, but there are so many who don't accept that. Any other things? Al-Rihal. Yeah, absolutely. That can be the caravans or the tents. Yes, absolutely. When we think of people, an important figure we looked at today is, what is his name? Al-Tufayl ibn Amr, the poet, the man with cotton in his ears. By the way, when he went back to his people, because he was so influential, they all accepted it. He told them, either you accept Islam or I would leave, I live on my own. So they all accepted. They all accepted just because of him. Long story has some qualifications to it. Who else do we have here? We have Al-Akabah ibn Abdelnour, the Prophet's uncle. We have the Prophet himself, of course.
Sheikh, if I may,
Yeah.
why do you think Al-Akabah accepted Islam? I mean, this is the first time I've
Really?
heard someone argue for him accepting Islam.
That's a good question. I think kufr or disbelief is a very big word. Being ethical in and of itself is part of faith, part of Iman, part of, if someone has that sense of deep love for the Prophet ﷺ. Of course, he was not just supporting the Prophet ﷺ because he was his nephew, but also because he had seen the Prophet ﷺ, his character, his personality, his ethics, how he carries himself, all those things. And he himself, Allah was a man of ethics. He was a very noble man himself. His famous story with Abraha al-Habashi and the year of the elephant. And why would I accuse someone like that of being a disbeliever when I don't have really a proof? So I'd rather say you need a proof from the people who accused him of disbelief. I'd actually reverse the equation. The origin, the established fact is that you are a believer until proven otherwise, not vice versa. And especially if this man has a good history behind him and the support he had shown for Islam. And to be honest, it's Allahu A'lam, and I'm not, of course, I'm not saying that I'm absolutely certain that this is the case. But my understanding of faith, my understanding of Islam is wider than just someone who says specific phrases or the Prophet says, the author says, Al-Iman wa waqara fil qalbi wa saddaqa bil amal. There has to be how your behavior, how it impacts really, how you live, what you believe in, really. Yes, yeah.
No.
Okay. So we had Al-Abbas, we had Al-Tufayl. By the way, I remember in a class in Al-Azhar, I think I mentioned this before. Because there is a verse in Surah Al-An'am that says, وَهُمْ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ وَيَنْأَوْنَ عَنْهُ. And amongst them are people that would protect the Prophet ﷺ, but they themselves keep themselves away from his message. Some commentators say that this is a reference to his grandfather, and in the sense that he was not a believer, but he supported the Prophet ﷺ. And we had a lady who came crying, and she said, "Are is there anything in the Islamic tradition that really shows any glimpse of hope that Abu Talib is a man of faith and a man of, and that he has maybe has a chance of salvation? I'm grappling with the fact that he's just going to be put in hell. I mean, and I do remember the lady was crying, really. And to me, as I said, I am convinced that he's, again, my definition of faith is a little bit broader than how it is normally perceived. So for me, again, it has to be proven otherwise. Like, think of his uncle, Abu Lahab. That's a man who staunchly stood against the Prophet ﷺ and harmed him. With a man like that, yes, you can definitely make a good case. But with Abu Talib, why would you be so, keen on accusing him of that? I mean, yeah, I'd actually say it's the opposite. Yeah. What's because else we have? Yes.
Would the tribes be considered people?
Yeah,
the tribes,
absolutely.
the sort of ancestry they all kind of belong to and
Yes,
in the
yes,
same
yes.
lines of.
We do see tribalism is quite. The people coming from Medina, they have it's in the back of their minds. This is a concern that we have. We not just continue as a prophet, but also as a leader. We want someone to unite us. It's difficult in Medina. We need someone who can really unify us. So tribalism is so evident here. Okay.
12 leaders?
Hmm?
The 12
That
leaders?
well done, 12 leaders.
And the 75 men or 73 and 2 women?
Exactly, 12 men and then 75 people, 73 men and 2 women. Absolutely.
The Jewish people as well.
The Jewish community. By the way, there is when the Quran speaks of the Jewish community, the Quran never generalizes. The Quran never collectivizes. The Jewish community in Medina, they were very decent people who actually accepted the Prophet ﷺ. A good example of that is Abdullah ibn Salam. It's a really interesting story in Sahih al-Bukhari. Maybe at some point we'll look into it. So, when it comes to communities, we should never generalize, we should not collectivize as such. Ideas. What ideas come to your mind as you listen to those encounters?
Media and propaganda.
Media and propaganda, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Media and propaganda. Here you have a man who's wise, intelligent, a poet. Why do the historians of the Seerah emphasize that he was a poet? To show that he can actually assess the Quran. If he gets to listen to the Quran, he will get to know whether this is really a miracle or not. Because he is a poet. He knows what makes a good speech a good speech. But because of the media, because of the propaganda of the day, he stuffs his ears with cotton so he doesn't get to listen to the Prophet. But Allah wants him. Allah wants to guide him. So he gets into it. So the impact of media, absolutely. And by the way, this is not too far from us. Whenever we get fed with specific ideas or something, and then we take decisions and we take positions just on the basis of hearsay, without any sort of authentication or if you really want to have a position on anything, just listen to both sides. Listen to don't build judgments on just hearsay. Ask for proofs, ask for evidence. So yes, absolutely, the power of media, the power of propaganda, and poets were the primary means and channels of media back in those days, by the way. If in that tribal community, if you don't have a poet, that means you don't really have a good, you don't have a media platform, literally. Poetry was a big thing. Poetry managed to free Ankara ibn Shaddad from slavery. So poetry was a very big thing.
A bit similar, sorry, I was
Yeah.
going to say a bit similar to the cancel culture that we hear about
Absolutely.
now. They just
Absolutely.
wanted to cancel him.
Absolutely. They just want to cancel the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you see, and we've read the statement. We don't want the problem that we deal with to really relocate to your place. We're trying to protect you. Yes, that's a very powerful statement. Thank you so much for this. What other ideas?
But growth, planning and strategy.
Strategic planning.
Yeah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had a strong plan. If it's not working in Mecca, maybe there's another way.
Absolutely.
Through Medina, but also how to do it, spreading the word through one person and then 1275, and also taking the risk to get out of this, out of the protection of his people, and just moving to Medina.
And this is absolutely, and this is a move of life. Like he says, I'm not coming back to Makkah. Even if I become the most powerful man in the whole Arab Peninsula, giving you my pledge. That's a hefty thing to do that. Yeah.
Choosing these battles basically.
Yes,
Instead of
absolutely.
Instead of started.
And it's at a time when he had seen a really difficult time in Ta'if. So it's the moment when he's absolutely down, but he gets more resolve, really. Absolute strategic planning. Yes, yeah.
This idea of like positive secret gatherings and secret conversation and dialogue. You can do it in a lot of negative ways, but this idea of doing something in secret but trying to do positive with it kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. Before going public, have some. You're right. Absolutely. We are told in the books of Seerah that they would meet after the third. When the first third of the night would pass. So they were very aware that by the way, the people of Mecca could feel that something is going on. So next day, after this day, for Aqaba, because they could feel that people were moving. Those 75 people were not everyone. So the people who came from Medina were a lot more than that, by the way. So the people of Mecca next day, they went to the Medina tribes and they asked them what was happening yesterday. They said nothing was happening. They didn't know themselves. Right? Only after a couple of days they got to realize that they didn't have a pledge with the Prophet ﷺ. They actually went after some of them and they called two leaders of those leaders. They called them back. Sorry, one of them managed to flee. The other one he was brought back in Medina. That was Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. They actually tortured him until they got to know he's one of the leaders of Medina that can really give you a hard time in your trade caravan. If it passes by Medina, they just ask him, is it okay, you can go. So that shows the context. Was it the privacy was a big thing, definitely. And we have the Prophet it's a debate whether it's a hadith or not. استعينوا على قضاء حوائجكم بالكتمان. If you want something to get accomplished, try and do it in private. And I don't believe this is because of hasad or something. I believe it is, there is some power to privacy. Even mentally, if you are trying something in private, if it goes forward and succeeds, you become so happy and share it in public if you wish. If it does not succeed, but you publicized it, I'm planning to do this, I'm planning to do that, I'm applying for this, I'm applying for that, but it doesn't go through. What happens? You're not just concerned about the failure, you are concerned primarily about how people will perceive you. They will perceive you as someone who failed. So you become a lot more concerned when you share something in public before it gets accomplished, really. So that adds to your disappointment deeply. So yeah. I mean, I also read in this that when the Prophet ﷺ had divided them into 12 sort of power distribution, so to speak. He's power distribution is managing and dividing the responsibility, so to speak, between amongst them. Any other ideas that you could think of?
Bravery. Bravery.
From whose side?
From the tribes, how they were willing to fight.
Absolutely. Actually said, if you want us to go fight right now, we're happy to fight. Yes, absolutely. Bravery, so in some traditions they call it هي الفضائل. Bravery, الشجاعة هي الفضائل. What does that mean? What is stopping you from being honest? Could be that I'm afraid, I'm not brave enough to say the truth. What is stopping you from, leaving a job that you're not really happy with? I am afraid that I won't get another job. What is stopping you from standing up for the truth? I'm afraid that I might not get punished. So they end up saying, الشجاعة هي الفضائل. If you are brave enough, without power, without being reckless, that's another extreme shouldn't fall into. So definitely الشجاعة is a big one. And I also find that the power of the Quran. All the talk to fight is just listen to a couple of verses from the Quran, just change his mind. And he has all this propaganda behind. Just a couple of verses from the Quran. If you listen attentively, the Quran has the power. And one needs to ask, why is it not impacting me in the same way? That's a serious question over here. That's a sad one as well. That we're not engaging with the Quran afresh. One last point. If you have any points, this time is chasing us. Yes.
No, Ahmed went first.
We can take one.
I was gonna say negotiation skill. I was quite impressed by how they started first the discussion with Al-Abbas, then the Prophet. It's kind of
beautiful. The negotiation, absolutely. As I said earlier, Al-Abbas was so practical. They want to make sure everything is in place, and then the Prophet you come with the essence of the message. But I really want to make sure that that's the process of negotiation. Absolutely. Yes, yeah. Safety as well. Making sure my nephew is safe. His community is going to be safe. These are serious questions as well. Yes.
Similar to this, I guess, this idea of supporting, they were very willing to support him with anything. They were very willing to have him come to them, immigrate host him and all this, and all the people coming in. So this idea, I guess it's a known trait of, the Arabs back in the day and stuff, the kindness and the willing to support everyone, and support your people and stuff like that, so they're willing to take him on in that way.
That's true. That is so true.
Yeah.
The nature of the tribal system is very complicated. It's when historians come to study pre-Islamic times, you have two different readings: a positive reading and a negative reading. You have a historian who would say it was a fantastic community. They were so supportive. If they support you, they will always be by your side, no matter what. And if they take you as you belong to me, you belong to them. They will die for you. They will literally die for you. And others would look into the more negative sides. Maybe the fact that they would fight for the most trivial reasons. A couple of weeks ago we talked about how they would fight over a camel for 40 years. Right? The people of Medina, they themselves were just fighting. They were willing to fight. The people of Mina, so I don't think I'm more positive than negative about the pre-Islamic Arabs, really. It's just that Prophet ﷺ shifted and refunctioned those capacities. He moved the those, a sense of tribalism into something that is good. He connected this to higher purposes. And so he managed to really establish a massive community. So he literally tapped into the virtues of that society. And I often talk about, I once taught a class on the pre-Islamic ethics. What is the ethical code? And I taught a long poem describing the ethics of the pre-Islamic time. And I think I said this before, some of the audience were reduced to tears because of the depth of the ethical system. I was reading a book as well, comparing the Arabs when they would have meetings with other with kings of the day, and they would see the Arabs, as not as an established community, but rather just as a tribal society compared to the Romans, the Persians. And there is a really long discussion on this from an Arab leader who would he thought that we are better than the Persians or better than the Romans. And he started to really enumerate the ethical system compared to the Persians and the Romans. And the king of the discussion, in that discussion, was so impressed. Maybe that's a story for another day, really. Any other ideas before I bring this to close? Yes?
There's this, drawing comparisons to today's world, this openness to accept refugees, and this openness to make someone who is not from your community a pillar of your community, a leader of your community.
That's a really, really good point. You do just get in there. You are making them a leader. That's a big thing. Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's a really good point that you brought. That sense of openness. I think the whole world was not as in today's world, everything is it feels like people live in boxes. Like you've been born in this box, you don't move to another box. Back in those days, it was a lot more fluid and a lot more, open by definition. But that's definitely a big thing. The Quran speaks to this, but we will come to it, inshallah, in the next episodes. But thank you so much for your contributions. So that we'll meet up next week with another day. Inshallah, we'll pick a good day. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. Thank you so much.